Well, let's go with another case that I'm also going to tell you about.
The next case.
I'm going to stretch a little because this gets heated.
It gets heated. Hi. All right, okay, I'll apologize in advance because my pronunciation is, well, the shrink next door perfect. In the early 80s, Marty Markowitz is a man with money, but not with the peace of mind that others here have. Okay, it's them. Wow, Martin Markowitz? No. Marty Markowitz? Cool, I'm trying to take this seriously, but it's impossible.
It's not hot in here.
Come on, let's get started. Oh, come on. This case is really intense, okay? In the early 1980s, Marty Markowitz is a man with money, but not with the peace of mind that you might think money brings. He has anxiety, panic attacks, he has trouble making decisions, and he feels lost in his life and with his family. His sister recommends a renowned psychiatrist in New York who is very famous. Isaac Hirschkopf.
We are in New York and both of them are Jewish. And of course, it's a bit like the previous case.
That's right.
That's the gobergario from, okay, my sister recommended it to me and it was recommended to her by a rabbi. He's part of the group, of the same religion, of the same community, so I trust him.
That's right.
Not to mention that he's a psychiatrist,
And a renowned psychiatrist, kind of famous, who has worked with celebrities. He's someone with a reputation and prestige, right? So, of course. Well, basically, from now on, we're going to call the psychiatrist Ike. Okay? He's one of those doctors who doesn't just seem like a psychiatrist, but moves with confidence, speaks with authority, projects success, and, as they say, has charisma, right? Marty comes into the appointment looking for exactly that, someone to help organize her mind. I have to mention one thing, and that's that Marty is an insecure person, unable to make decisions. Every time she has to make a decision, she has panic attacks, right? And here the psychiatrist has an important role.
Yes, Marty has many of the traits that in the book we describe as the perfect victim. You know, that person who really doubts her own judgment, who is very afraid of making mistakes, afraid of uncertainty, afraid of rejection, afraid of punishment. She is a person, well, with low self-esteem and who also comes from a wealthy family, who in a way has had things made easy for her and hasn't been allowed to develop, right? He hasn't had to face that uncertainty, the trial and error, this works out for me, this doesn't, I learn from it. So he hasn't been able to develop that inner compass of having confidence in himself, learning, growing from his mistakes. And he just kind of goes through life, helpless and on a bed of cotton.
It's a vulnerable profile, almost like he's wearing a neon sign. Take advantage of me, so of course, well, at first the therapy works, right? He talks as if someone is watching him. To Marty, right? And that gives Marty a lot of relief, because in the end, when you have anxiety, having someone explain that there's a logic to it, there's an explanation for this, it brings a lot of relief, right? A lot of comfort and a strong bond. It's like turning down the volume of the world, right? And then regular sessions start to happen. What Marty thinks she's paying for as therapy later turns into something much darker, okay? The first year seems like normal therapy. What happens is that Ike starts expanding his territory within the relationship and begins to cross personal boundaries that no mental health professional ever should. Marty hires Ike at her company so that Ike works at her company at Marty's company.
Well, as you know, psychologists have a code of ethics. We have very strict rules and boundaries that we have to respect. For many reasons, and one of them is for the protection of the patient and for the quality of the therapy and for the process to work. I think Ike fulfills a fantasy that many patients might have, and that is I want to know that my psychologist cares about me, right? Many people, when they come to therapy, have this fear or this doubt of, okay, my psychologist listens to me, supports me, validates me, but I'm paying them. Do they really care about me? Do they really like me? Do they like me as a person? Am I pleasant? Do they have affection for me? And that's why there are some patients who, in some way, try to cross the boundaries of therapy to try to confirm that they really matter to their therapist, right? But of course, a psychologist crossing the boundaries doesn't confirm that you care about your patient. You can care about your patient while maintaining those boundaries. But he fulfills the fantasy precisely because of that, because he wants to position himself before Martin as a figure of, I really do care about you, I really am here for you, right? You matter to me so much as a patient, that I even introduce you to my wife, that I even invite you to my daughter's baptism, that I even go to your company to help you with your project, because you really matter to me, you're a special patient. And this, of course, for someone like Martin, it's very important to see someone who has authority because she's a psychiatrist and is also socially well-positioned and who is very charismatic and self-confident. In some way, she reflects everything Martin wants to be. So when someone you admire who is exactly how you want to be gets so involved with you, it's a huge reinforcement and creates a lot of dependence.
Absolutely.
Also in the sessions, something the psychiatrist does is talk a lot about himself.
Yes.
Sometimes we psychologists do what are called self-disclosures, meaning we share something from our own lives. But it's done briefly, precisely, and strategically. Because we think it can serve as a mirror, because it can work as a metaphor to help the patient realize something. Maybe also to repair the bond. But in this case, self-disclosures are made to say, look how cool I am.
Look how important I am.
Look how well I'm doing, you have to listen to me, I know what's right, you have to let yourself be completely guided by me. And she starts telling her what to do directly. It's not that she asks her, hey, how do you feel, what do you want? She just directly tells her, you have to do this, you have to do that. Text that girl, break up with the other, and put your money here. And of course, for someone like Martin, having someone tell you what you have to do, it's gratifying because it prevents you from facing your fear of making mistakes, but this is very dangerous. Be careful with what I mentioned right at the beginning about facing our fears, insecurities, and so on, because if we don't, we become very easy to manipulate.
Well, that's it. That therapy doesn't just stay at how you feel. It starts to give opinions about specific decisions, about who you should talk to. Knowing which family members support or hurt you, who envies you, and which friends use you for their own gain seems like advice at first, but in the end, you trust your therapist, right? So Marty trusts because this is someone who has proven themselves through therapy, because also there were moments when Marty made progress in therapy, right? And that's also important so that he trusts AIK and the therapeutic process even more. At the same time, AIK does something that's key to understanding the rest. She becomes Marty's main voice. Not just when there's a crisis, she's always there. Calls, messages, availability. The relationship becomes all-consuming. Instead of therapy giving Marty autonomy, poor Marty, AIK gradually takes over more and more, and Marty starts revolving around AIK.
Imagine your psychologist goes with you to break up with your girlfriend and speaks for you. It's weird, isn't it?
Literally.
I think some people would like, tell him what you told me before you tell him what was that.
And that's it. And Marty basically becomes AIK's puppet, and their relationship gets closer and closer. What I'm about to say is intense, okay? Marty has a property in the Hamptons, which is an area in New York where rich people have their mansions, okay? In New York. And then Ike starts showing up around there. At first, he starts out as a guest, like a friend of her patient. It's a bit of a strange relationship, but well... And then he starts spending more and more time at the Hamptons mansion, which is Marty's main house. Right? But over time, the dynamic reverses, okay? What seems like a guest, which is AIK, actually becomes the owner. Marty goes from being the host to just another guest who occupies less and less space in his own house, as if he had to adapt to the presence of AIK, as if that house no longer belonged to him.
It's that AIK starts to decide what renovations need to be done, how the house should be decorated. She puts up photos of herself with celebrities around the house and takes down the ones of Marty's family. Marty goes to sleep in the guest house, and he comes with his wife and daughters, throws parties, and invites his friends. Marty doesn't know anyone, but of course AIK introduces him. This is part of your therapy because this way you'll face your anxiety, your social fear, and you'll gain confidence. And of course, Marty doesn't have anyone except the psychiatrist,
because she's already made sure to cut down her social circle, to get angry with her sister, with her friends. So in the end, the only support person she has is AIK. It becomes AIK through isolation, right?
Again, the star technique of manipulators, the bubble, isolating the victim. And well, I'm sure it's happened to you that when you go to therapy, you realize you have a relationship that's not going so well, that maybe needs to be updated, worked on, or ended, right? You have to reach that conclusion on your own, not due to manipulation by your psychiatrist, psychologist, or anyone else. Will tell you that you have to end this relationship. They will never tell you what you have to say, what you have to do, and even less will they tell you to cut ties with certain people. Well, this psychiatrist did that with many wealthy patients whom he could take advantage of. Your sister is toxic, your partner is toxic, your mother is toxic, everyone was toxic except him, and everyone had to cut ties with everyone except him.
Of course, of course. Well, in the end, during those years too, the relationship with Marty's family also changed. Because Marty had a sister who protected him a lot, who took care of him, right? Because Marty's sister was able to see that he was a more vulnerable person. In fact, it's his sister who recommends Ike, the psychiatrist, to him, and he ends up cutting off his relationship with her too, because Ike orders him to. He tells him his sister is trouble and he needs to end their relationship.
She's jealous that you're making progress. She doesn't want you to become independent. She doesn't want you to be strong. Your progress is bothering her, right? She wants to keep you vulnerable. She wants to take advantage of you. Manipulators do this often, you know? When they notice someone is more innocent with that personality, they usually say that. They say that others are taking advantage of you, when in reality, it's that person who wants to take advantage of you.
Exactly. The people who get upset about the boundaries you set are the same ones who take advantage of them. That's right. Okay, well, that's it. In the end, Marty did exactly what Ike said, right? And then there's another layer, the money and the paperwork. In some stories about control, the turning point is a symbolic gesture, right? But here, it's been reported that these are decisions about assets, real-life management, accounts, expenses, payments, administration, and stories that Marty ends up paying millions of dollars in fees to Ike. Okay, this is intense.
Consider that he not only goes to his office, but also hires him as the company's psychologist. With good fees and making all kinds of decisions in the company. Then, he takes him to his house and he decides what happens with the house, how it's renovated, what is done with all of that, what parties are organized, what foundation is created, and which events they attend. Come on, it's a totally parasitic attitude.
Okay, and the most unsettling thing is that, from the outside, it might look like a strange friendship between a star psychiatrist and a wealthy patient. But the truth is that this relationship is getting more and more complicated, isn't it? In certain circles, especially in Ike's circle, nobody really questions it, because besides being a dynamic he has with several patients, status is involved. The famous psychiatrist, the beautiful house, the Hamptons atmosphere, and the social life, it all just fits together so well.
Yes, there's that halo effect. He's a famous psychiatrist, wealthy, very successful, so it must be normal, it must be fine. And besides, you can see that when someone points out that something is strange, the psychiatrist plays the victim. In the sense of, you're attacking me for getting involved and caring too much about my patients. It's not like he's reframing it, right? I'm not telling you that you're crossing ethical boundaries, but you accuse me of being too good of a psychologist and caring about my patients?
Sure, well, nothing. There comes a point when Marty starts to realize, starts to notice, right? That he does. From sleeping in the guest house in the garden and Ike sleeping in the mansion with the whole family throwing parties. Right? It's like Marty says, wait a minute, let me get myself together.
A little fact. How many years does this last?
I don't know.
27.
Oh.
27 years old.
She was vulnerable. Marty was vulnerable.
Think about when. When he cuts ties with his sister, she has young nephews. When Marty realizes the manipulation, his nephews already have children. That is to say, his life has been lost 27 years.
What madness.
I mean, he was really old.
Of course, he was already old.
No. But you trust your psychologist now, but I don't know if...
Maybe you lack authenticity, right? And at the slightest thing, you just let yourself...
Of course, exactly, especially considering Marty's profile, who was a very insecure person, and suddenly Ike positions himself as his savior.
In the end, it's sunk cost bias. I've already cut off relationships with friends and family, so I have no one left. I'm completely confused, I don't know what's right, I don't know what's wrong, I'm completely alone. So I cling to what I have, which is this family that's my psychiatrist, with his wife and his daughters and his circle. I mean, let's think that for him, giving all that up is first realizing that he has made a huge mistake. By going down that path, secondly, he faces emptiness, loneliness. How many times do we cling to something that's toxic, that's wrong, that's harmful? Because we're afraid of being alone? Let's see, it's not that you have the ability to do it.
It kind of reminds me of people who join cults, you know? Once you're in and you've given your money, your family, everything you have, and when you start to realize it, all you have to do is take the step.
It's really brainwashing. It's just very exaggerated and grotesque when we see it in cults, in coercive groups. But one-on-one manipulative relationships are the same. It's brainwashing. It's me against everyone else. Consider how Ike might say, everyone is bad, wants to deceive and take advantage of you, but I care, I'm helping and telling you the truth. The truth is, it's the technique of absolute truth, of revealing the truth that I talk about in the book. So, it's been 27 years, it's very complicated, it's even worse than a romantic relationship because on top of that, he has the authority figure of a psychiatrist. Every time Marty said he didn't want to do something, expressed something that didn't feel right to him, that he didn't like, the psychiatrist would tell him, you're regressing, you're not making progress. It's that you don't have judgment, your mental health isn't very good, of course. The fear of regressing is very strong. The fear of being a bad patient is very strong, it's very big. Sometimes even Ike would play the victim like, well, it's just that maybe I'm just a really bad psychiatrist, I have to quit, I'm not doing a good job with you, I'm not a good doctor. And of course the other person, to calm him down, would say, no, you're right, I'll do it.
What a manipulative narrative. Well, in the end, Marty starts to notice it, he starts to realize it, and he realizes that his life no longer belongs to him. And there are things that even he himself finds hard to justify, like whether it's even a friendship or a doctor-patient relationship, right? And so Marty decides to talk about what he's going through, decides to ask for help, tries to regain control of his life, tries to tell his story. And then the story starts to be investigated. He decides to go to, I don't know if it's the police, I don't remember exactly, and he asks for help. And then they start investigating, and indeed they realize that he has been scammed for 27 years, and that's it. In 2021, after a disciplinary process,
just recently,
just yesterday, after a disciplinary process, a document from the state of New York, it orders that Ike surrender his medical license, and later he loses attempts to reverse that decision. That is the institutional closure of a story that, for Marty, had lasted half his life.
The psychiatrist did this with other patients as well. One even made him the heir to his multi-million-dollar will. It was a dynamic that the man had studied and knew very well. In the end,
is it in practice?
No, they just took away his license for malpractice. If we psychologists have so many rules, it's because in the end, the patient comes in a vulnerable situation. And when a person has a lot of cognitive empathy, meaning they know how to read the person in front of them, they know what worries them, what moves them, they know how to guide them, but they don't have emotional empathy. That is, they don't feel discomfort, they don't feel what the other person feels. It's a very dangerous weapon, of course. When you come in, you consult with that level of anxiety, fear, discomfort, and loneliness. What the psychologist tells you, well, it can be taken as gospel. And even more so if they're also involved in other personal matters of yours. And well, the psychiatrist would focus on when someone with money and this profile came to the consultation, he could easily see how he could take advantage of it.
What kind of profile do you think psychiatrist Ike had?
Well, we also see psychopathic traits here, but in this case, what I think stands out the most is the level of narcissism. Because in the end, what the psychiatrist was looking for through Marty, was that sense of status, wealth, social success, and so on. I have a mansion in the Hamptons. In fact, he would tell people it's my mansion, rubbing shoulders with celebrities. Whenever a celebrity showed up, he would take a picture with them, even if they weren't talking. If I meet an actor on the street, get near them, and someone snaps a photo, I can say, see, I was with this person. In fact, we can see there, let's see, yes, with an actress. He had this desire to be something more than what he already was, and he achieved it by leeching off his victims, his patients. We also have to take into account the context that we're in the 80s. Psychology is a...
No, but this is wrong.
Why?
It says doctor victim.
No, that's how it is, that's how it is.
How?
He's the victim. Ah, okay, yes, okay.
Sorry. I kept thinking all the time that Martin was him.
It's just that appearances can be deceiving, right? We can see him with a friendly face, with a smile. He really looks innocent, right? We always think that those who smile are good people.
Wow.
And so we also have to think about the context. We're in the 1980s. Psychology is a very young, very recent profession. There's still so much to learn, to research, to discover. And the ontological codes, the psychologist's codes, are really something recent. I don't know what the legislation was like in the 80s in the United States. Around that time, for example, the Menendez brothers case involved their father paying the psychiatrist to share information. So, we have to keep in mind that nowadays, I think we have a much clearer idea socially of what is normal and what isn't normal, in therapy and in a psychologist-patient relationship. At that time, seeing a psychologist or psychiatrist was considered taboo. No, you don't talk about it, you don't share it, and it's not very clear what's normal and what's not normal. So you also have to keep that in mind, the context.
To me, it sounds like a textbook narcissistic profile. It fits everything. The need for admiration, manipulation, control, lying. In the end, it's a very narcissistic profile. And that role of doctor, of psychiatrist, really covered up that lack that narcissists have, that narcissistic wound, that need for admiration. So I think it was the perfect match. A vulnerable person with a narcissistic profile, that's why it lasted so long.
We can see that the motivation of manipulators in both cases is very different. In the first one, manipulation is the goal itself. It's enjoying manipulating and dominating. And here it's the means, here it's about the motivation, here it's about achieving status, success, image, money. Because he wasn't just taking money for his own account. He wanted to throw parties, attract celebrities, and mingle with them. He wanted to have that image of being a successful psychiatrist, treating the wealthiest people in New York, having a house in the Hamptons.
Then there's that other thing that as a psychiatrist, as a psychologist, you can't reveal who your patient is. If you work with famous people, you can't talk about it. Another vulnerability, another violation of the code of ethics, yet another one.
And this leads us to talk a bit about how, hey, not everyone who works in mental health is a good person.
100%, I'm very clear about that.
No, I was just looking at her because she knows about a case.
I knew why she was looking at me.
Although, the podcast we did on my channel said that there are victims.
But because I made a mistake. Oh. That's it. Okay? So what did you all think of this case?
Surreal.
It's really intense.
Can this kind of person be treated in any way, both of them, in therapy? That person?
Psychopaths, no. Psychopaths, it's a bad idea to take them to therapy because they're going to learn to manipulate even better. And a narcissist? Well, you once told me something that I loved.
Which one?
Look, Claudia once gave me this metaphor and I really like it for the audience too. Wait, let me tell you about it. For narcissists and for psychopaths, they are personality structures. So imagine you're building a building with blue bricks, and when you get to the 9th floor, they hand you a red brick. Where would you put that? You can't. So, with these kinds of cases, with psychopaths and narcissists, something very similar happens. It's a personality structure, and suddenly wanting to change that, wanting to modify it, wanting to improve it is unfeasible. Remember, these people don't realize they have a problem, so real change happens when someone goes to therapy wanting to change themselves. If I don't have a problem, why change anything? Do you remember that you told me about it or not?
The house metaphor. Personally, I have seen cases of narcissism, and I know that healing goes a bit against what we like to hear, what we like to listen to. It's also because from where I work, which is relational psychotherapy, narcissism. Let's see how I can explain myself. I'm not just talking about the label of narcissistic personality disorder, but when we say narcissism, we're talking about a way of defending oneself against vulnerability. We all feel vulnerable in some way, and the defense against that vulnerability, well, in narcissism, what is sought is an overcompensation. I create an alter ego for myself. I create an image that can be of different types: a victim image, a grandiose image, a rivalry image. Various images can help compensate for that vulnerability and emptiness. So this is what we mean by the structure. I, in my childhood and in my development, build a way to defend myself against my vulnerability, and that's what we call personality structures. There are different ones, not obsessive, phobic, narcissistic, in that case, borderline. So, a house can be renovated, we can tear down walls, we can change windows, we can paint. However, the foundations, what's underneath, are much harder to change. That's what we mean by personality structure. The longer we've been building the house, in other words, the older we get, the harder it will be to change that. That's why a 20-year-old patient isn't the same as a 50-year-old one. I won't be able to work as much. The younger we are, the more flexibility there is when it comes to modifying that personality structure. Remember, there are different types of narcissists. Some people come to therapy, and I recognize narcissism in them. And they don't fit the stereotype we have of a grandiose person lacking empathy and so on. But I'm simply seeing that way of defending themselves, and I can work with that, and it can become much more flexible. Now, I can't change the foundations. The person will tend, when they feel vulnerable, attacked, scared, and so on, to defend themselves in that way. But I will be able to make it much more flexible, and for them to find more adaptive and healthier ways to manage their discomfort, their vulnerability, and so on. So from my model and from my point of view, I think that narcissism can be improved quite a lot. Even, depending on the case, it can even be healed. It depends on the particular case, their emotional experiences, impacts, and so on. But obviously, the older we get and the more narcissism takes over our personality, the more inflexible and difficult it becomes. As Deborah rightly says, a key ingredient is whether the person feels discomfort with their way of being.
That's right.
One of the most important things is when the person realizes it. Something isn't right with me, I can't change it, I can't fix it, this takes over me. But there's something that's not right, and that's a blessing for therapy.
Yes, we've had people at the clinic who come in and say, I'm a narcissist and I don't know how to change. That's a very good sign. What happens is that it's rare for someone to recognize themselves as a narcissist. Sometimes it happens, right? But it's rare. Otherwise, we wouldn't be psychologists if we didn't think people could change. Often, especially with manipulative personalities, I think it's actually counterproductive.
It depends on the degree of Machiavellianism. For instance, without emotional empathy, it's complex. If you don't feel discomfort when hurting others, what reason is there to change? And yes, I think that as psychologists, especially in psychology outreach, it's like we understand all types of personalities, we have empathy and so on. But the bad ones are the narcissists. And it's like, come on, they also need to be treated. Then on YouTube, people tell me that I defend psychopaths and narcissists. They accuse me of being funded by some association or something. But come on, I think that if we want to build a healthier society, we also have to treat the bad seeds and not just point them out. But well, in this case, it's a really bad seed. Well, thank you very much, Deborah. I had a great time. I hope everyone else did too. I hope you all enjoyed it.
What do I do? Should I leave? Should I sit down?
Yes, but they didn't save you a seat.
They haven't saved me a seat. What's wrong, sweetheart?
Okay, yes.
It's relevant, I wanted to know. What do you think Ike did to Martin? Because in his mind, he was manipulated. If it's already been 5-10 years, Why does he realize at 17 that he's been manipulated?
Well, look, there's a series that's based on this case. It's not clear what's real and what's not because in the end, it's a very private case. There hasn't been a documentary and there's not much information either. But apparently, what is shown in the series is that he has a very serious health problem. His only support, his only friend is the psychiatrist. And when he's hospitalized, the psychiatrist not only doesn't go to see him, but is actually taking advantage of the situation to throw a party at his house, right? So it seems that when he finds himself so alone, when he distances himself from him, he realizes it's like something clicks and he understands. Also in the series, for example, there's another patient who realizes what's happening and tells Marty, and Marty, not only does the psychiatrist not believe her, but through him, he manipulates her into abandoning her on a road, telling her that she's toxic and so on. Maximum triangulation. I don't know how it is in the real case, honestly, but well, I guess at some point something would click. And usually it's either that someone shows up and helps you see it, or something happens that makes you face reality. Anyway, I did want to ask you...
I wanted to ask, what's the difference between a narcissist and a narcissistic psychopath?
You have it in the book. A bookseller will be selling books at the exit. Persuasion?
I mean, I'm gonna do it super quickly. For me, the key difference is, the narcissistic psychopath, what sets the narcissist apart from the psychopath is the need for admiration. The psychopath, just a psychopath, a primary psychopath, an integrated psychopath, doesn't care about admiration. What he wants is power and control. That's why we can see, for example, right now in politics, that it's everywhere. Psychopathy, right? It's super obvious, isn't it? But the psychopathic narcissist does need that admiration, but also needs control and power. They want it all. For me, that's the difference. What do you think, Clau?
I like to explain it as a salad, just like I explain it in the book. It went away, right? A salad usually has a main ingredient, which, for example, can be lettuce. And could it be, in this case, narcissism? Then you can add different ingredients that will shape the personality and how it works. You can have a more introverted psychopath and a more extroverted psychopath, and that means that each person is unique. Not all people with the same structure or profile behave the same way. You can have a narcissist where narcissism is the main base of the salad, the structure, and depending on the experiences and lessons they have, other ingredients are added that will affect their behavior. Also, obviously, there's the course of life. If I have this way of being and society reinforces it, it will take over me more and more. And my ability to change and to empathize with some people will decrease even more. For example, Jeffrey Epstein, little by little, you can see how not only are there no consequences for the bad things he does, but they're even reinforced. So, when society tells you that's okay, you internalize it and it takes over you more and more. For me, he was also a primary psychopath. And I don't think Jeffrey Epstein is.
And a narcissist.
Of course, yes, but well, read this salad. We're running a bit short on time. Come on, quick questions, not theoretical ones.
There's one here and another one there.
I remembered something from the book. You said that women tend to manipulate emotionally and men instrumentally. I think in these two examples you can kind of see that the manipulation by the cousin was more emotional and the psychiatrist's manipulation seems more instrumental to me because he was also seeking power. Something more material, even money.
Who knows if he studied medicine and psychiatry just for this? Who knows?
Totally. There's another one.
One question is it true that integrated psychopaths are very difficult to identify, especially because they control their behavior, their words, and everything else so much? So I wanted to know if it's true that you can identify psychopaths through facial features or if they have things like that.
Honestly, I don't...
There are studies, but it's not known for sure. Science as of today. If there's a reference in Spain, it's Vicente Garrido, who I think everyone knows. That's it. He's the best. Well, if you listen to Vicente Garrido, he never talks about physiognomy. I've listened to other criminologists and behavior analysts and so on, but for sure, it's still not known. It's something that's still being researched.
In the end, there are differences at the level of hormones and also at the level of neurotransmitters. and it's supposed to be more correlational than causal. And yes, you can see that there may be some differences. But anyway, I definitely wouldn't go around using that, okay? All right, let's move on to the last one. You're manipulating me.
Because you seek group approval, it doesn't bother you when they reject you for those actions.
Yes, but you'll view it as a victim, thinking they're doing this to me, instead of asking, what have I done? That's how you end up here, yes. Currently, I'm rewatching La que se avecina from the start, which I highly recommend as a psychologist. And, well, Estella Reynolds is the ultimate example of victim narcissism, with a lot of histrionic traits. And now, thank you very much, Deborah.
I'm gonna sit down.